Welcome to the UIAAA Connection podcast. Hometown Ticketing is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection podcast and to provide schools nationwide with the best options for digital ticketing for their events. Visit their website at hometownticketing.com to learn how they can make digital ticketing possible and simple at your school. Thank you to Hometown Ticketing for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter. Today we are pleased to have as our guest Sheri Stice, Certified Master Athletic Administrator. And I guess your title is what? Chair of the certification?
In fact, a certification coordinator.
Yeah, certificate. Okay, that's perfect. So welcome, Sheri, and we look forward to having a great conversation with you. Why don't you start by sharing with our listeners across the country where you grew up, where you went to college, your first job, those types of things.
Oh, okay. Well, I grew up in a small town right outside of Houston, Texas, named Alief, and it's a farm and ranch environment. Actually, was heavily involved in 4-H as a young child. In 1965, and by the way, that's pre-Title IX era.
Yeah.
Well, I was fortunate enough to have a school principal who believed that girls needed the advantage of sport, and he began all-girls sports at that time. I was in 6th grade at the time. Prior to during my initiation to sport, I was actually a member of the Texas Youth Rodeo Association and competed in local and regional rodeo. So that's where my competitive edge came from, I think, and as long with 4-H. I'm a graduate of Sam Houston State University. I got my bachelor's there as well as my master's. They are the present D1 Southland Conference football national champions right now. So
that's
we're
awesome.
Real proud. Southland Conference, yeah. I began my career teaching and coaching in the private school arena, Mark, for about 3 years before moving to the public school arena in a very fast growing suburban school district that became my home for 35 years. As I progressed there, I was also an assistant principal. I was the director of secondary physical education during that time. In 1978, we had 2 high schools and 3 middle schools. And when I retired, I was responsible for 10 high schools and 17 middle schools. So you can see at a fast building at a fast rate of speed. Believe it or not, I'm back to the teaching arena. Right now, I'm teaching with the Ohio U Masters of Sports Administration program, along with my responsibilities at the NIAAA.
So
Nice.
When was the first year you started teaching? Would have been
1973.
Said 1973.
Yeah.
Okay, and then when did you retire? Retire from teaching at least.
Yeah, 2012, I retired from education in general.
Okay, so let's go back to your rodeo and talk for a minute. So were you able to compete in junior high and high school in rodeo? Did they have that in Texas?
Actually did, yes. That was very much a part of my career in middle school. Actually before middle school and high school. It became a lot more difficult once I became involved in sports, interscholastic sports, but I did continue to during the summers.
What was your favorite event in rodeo?
Well, I was a barrel racer.
Oh, okay.
So that was the one I was most interested in. If my brothers wrote me in, I would do heading and heeling with them, but it was not one of my favorites.
Okay. That's perfect. Let's talk for a minute about some of the mentors you had growing up in coaching, or your parents or were bosses, that type of a thing.
Well, I was really lucky to be surrounded by some strong individuals who let me know real fast that egos narrow our vision, and they kind of keep us from letting those mistakes guide our way. My parents never missed a game. They may not have both been able to be there, but at least one of them was. And they had a great impact on me growing up. I had coaches that cared and were generally interested in us in general. And they brought out the best of us in all different kinds of ways. My church youth leader was a big mentor of mine. My very first principal in a public school setting, and my very first principal in an administrative setting. I was so lucky to have those people early in those job descriptions because I learned from the very best very early on.
Let's go back and touch on Title IX comes out in 1972. Your first teaching job's 73. So you're maybe a junior at Sam Houston State. Were you able to compete at all in any sports at Sam Houston? Because it would have been brand new Title IX back then.
Actually, I did. And I want to clarify, I played. Do you remember 6-man basketball for girls, Mark?
Oh,
well,
yes. Three on one side, 3 on the other.
That's right. I played 6-man all throughout high school. Once I got to college, I said, I'm still going to do this. I love to play basketball, but an very early injury kept me from doing that. So it stopped. I had to stop playing basketball and went back to rodeo during college.
Okay, let's talk about, you went to your school where you stayed in 78, stayed till 2012. When did you become the district athletic director, and how long were you that?
I was an athletic director for 17 years. So that was 1995, 96. So it's a long time ago.
Well, let's talk about the job of AD when you first got it back in the mid 90s. And let's talk about the job of an athletic director today, and talk about the differences, and talk about how so much more has been added to it.
Well, as you said, I formally retired in 2012. Change was a constant, even back then. If you were in the game, you knew that as well. It will always be essential for athletic directors to be really flexible and focused in our environment, and have the leadership skills needed to deal with the limited resources that we have and the constant change. In my mind, Mark, the most dynamic change I see is in technology advancement. When I retired, it moved so fast I could hardly keep up, and I wasn't in the office. But technology is big. The state of local, state, and national health issues, primarily COVID, and the legislation and policy surrounding that was, I don't know how athletic directors handled it, to tell you the truth. It's so inundating, the amount of things that they had to deal with day to day, and the changes, the quick changes. And I think more often I see that this more candid hyper focus on negative stories about sports, and coaches in general have to be pretty inundating for the AD today. Communities and constituents change so quickly. They have to be ready to do that. They have to be ready for things that pop up that may require change, or may require just being more cognizant of. Sports medicine has changed, dealing with concussions, baseline testing, risk management is huge. Site infrastructure with safety is huge. But I'm going to tell you, in the last 10 years of my career, we were building schools so fast. We were building a school, either a middle school or a high school every year. So wow. I became very, very interested and good at that sort of planning, and enjoyed it immensely. Thank goodness I have a husband who's in the field as well. So construction, he was helped me with construction so much and understanding it. So it's quite dynamic. It has to be said, though, in many different ways. The underlying concept is that I could never look back, because it was done. I just had to keep looking forward, and I had to looking forward with intent, because just from the first school to the last school that I was involved in building, so much was changing. But fun. I enjoyed it so much.
Well, I can't imagine having a school built a year for the last decade of year. I mean, that's something. I moved from Jordan High, moved to a new school back in 1996, I want to say. The old school had been there for years and years, since 1907 or 1906. And I just remember, and I was just the AD. I just remember what a process it was just moving mid-year to that other building. I can't even imagine what it must have been like for you at that level, being over all those athletic facilities at a new school, and it happens every year.
Yeah.
Any stories that stick out during that time?
Gosh, there might be so many that would take us hours, because there was an issue with every building. I can imagine. I can tell you that if we had not involved our coaches and athletic leadership in those schools, the small tweaks that we made with each one would not have happened. You just can't do it without their input. And then I became so hyper-focused with Title IX issues that I wanted to make absolutely sure that we were doing everything by the straight and narrow with regard to those guidelines.
Absolutely. Let's talk for a moment about your journey with the Texas AD Association and how you got involved there, and the successes you've had there. I ask because it's strange. In other podcasts, I talk about how I can call people all over the US, but everybody that I know in Texas as an AD is a female, with the exception of Kelly, who's no longer with us. I knew Kelly when he was alive. What a great man.
Great man.
But it just seems, I think I had Daryl Wade back on the awards committee, was from Texas, but boy, everybody else is a female. So I just know all these great women for Texas. So talk about the Texas Association and your involvement, how you got started there.
Well, I became a member of the Texas Girls Coaches Association even when I was in the private school setting. And I can tell you that they shaped a lot of my philosophy with regard to coaching. And as I moved to administration, I began the immediate connection with the Texas State Athletic Directors Association. So it just was this very smooth transition because they had a very collegial relationship with each other. And as well, once I moved to the athletic office, I became involved with NIAAA. As an athletic administrator, I worked many workshops for coaches and provided summer workshops and workshops during the year, and that was through the Texas Girls Coaches Association. This particular opportunity opened up lots of opportunities for me to gain leadership with the AD Association. So I worked closely with conference development, and which was so beneficial to me in my NIAAA career. I was fortunate enough to be elected to the Region 5 Athletic Director's position. That is a position assigned by your peers. I'm just so proud to have obtained that and led that for the year. My first NIAAA conference was in 1997, and I was absolutely blown away.
Nashville.
I just blown away. I came home, and that was the highlight of my whole year. It was just amazing. I was hooked, Mark. I now know you know that feeling. Professionally, I was learning and growing as an AD exponentially, and I think that was because of that experience. We had begun leadership training in Texas at that time, and I became part of the state faculty, traveled to conferences all over the state to teach those that provided a wealth of knowledge and best practices for coaches. And the information and the building of relationships during that particular time was incredible. I met people back then that they are still dear friends and good relationships in this day. It's amazing. Due to the encouragement of a colleague of mine, I submitted an application to the NIAAA to become a member of the certification committee, and served my stint there. And after my committee stint, I was the vice chair of certification, then became the chair of certification. And at that time, I was also teaching at the national level. As I was approaching consideration of retirement, the NIAAA was making a strategic move to add staff positions, specifically targeting and leading certification process. And there was just not any denying that I wanted to apply for that job. And I was very fortunate to be selected to do that, and have been doing that since 2012.
Let me go back for a moment to Nashville. And the reason that I do that is because Nashville was also my first conference. And you and I, we've known each other for years, and we've come such a long way since Nashville. But for our listeners, I want you to describe that feeling when you got there, because when I was in Nashville, I was still lost when we left 4 days later, trying to go around Opryland and trying to find out where the meetings were and trying to get to everyone. And so I guess my point that I want you to make with our listeners is you and I were both rookies in 97, not rookies in the AD field, but rookies as first-time attendees. And because we chose to get involved, then so many doors open for us. So talk about that for a minute.
Well, it's almost really hard to describe. And I know you know that feeling, but I had to come home and ask myself, where have I been? And why have I not been involved before now? And immediately you wanted to network with people. You wanted to know what was going on in every state. I remember the first luncheon, I sat down next to people from Hawaii, and Utah, and I mean, from all over, and started asking questions. And you know, the funniest thing, the first couple of years, I thought it quite funny when people, I'd sit down, where are you from? Well, I'm from Houston, Texas. Hey, tell me, do the head football coaches in Texas really not have to teach? I get asked that question so much, you know, and so I had to explain to them the whole process of that. But anyway, it's always been kind of a funny thing that I've had to deal with. But in any regard, you remember when you started, we all had our leadership training courses, and I was on a mission. I was taking 4 courses every time I went. And I came home with these 3-ring binders.
Big, huge green ones.
Yeah. And I had to buy another suitcase just to get them home. And it's so true. I mean, and you just learned so much. Mark, I go back to those LTC manuals regularly when I was growing in my job. You know, I used them when we developed our student handbook. I used them during budget development. I used them during dealing with difficult parents. I used them. So they just became an invaluable resource for me. But I think they also became invaluable resources to our kids and our parents, because we initiated a lot of programs through that, the learning of that.
Speak for a moment about the importance of having a mentor as an athletic director. Obviously, you were mentored by many people, so was I. And of course, now in both of our positions, we've had a chance to mentor so many other people, both in our state and both nationally. So talk about why that's important for some of our, well, I won't say younger listeners, for some of our listeners that maybe haven't been in the job as long.
Well, the need for a collegial relationship is, are you there?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I lost your picture. Do you see?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see it. You're good.
Okay. Well, I think the need for a collegial relationship is critical to the success of individuals. And without that, we're not going to grow. And if you're lucky enough to have one immediately, you are in a really good place. An experienced role model guides the professional development of another person. And I am constantly, even now, in my position as certification director, I go to people all the time and say, okay, where are you at with your CMAA? Let's talk about it. Those are important things. We have to give each other some knowledge, give them continual feedback about what they're doing, encourage their growth, tell them how important it is. It's a natural coaching element that we're used to. We are coaches, and that's what we do best. And we're constantly getting feedback, seeing where we can help, and giving some guidance.
Very good. I want you to talk for a moment about the certification committee and the change that we went through. And well, let me explain it better. When you were on the committee and then you became a vice chair and then a chair, and then the professional development committee made the director of certification. And so there was a time when you were the chair and Ed Lockwood was the vice chair, but we're on the payroll of the NIAAA. And then we went back to it. You still kept your positions and got more put onto your plate. And then we went back to a chair, I think, with Jake and Tall and those guys and Pete. And so talk about how that's changed and how the certification has grown so much just in your time, well, just in the past 15 years.
Yeah. Well, the decision to go back to membership leadership was critical to us. We weren't quite sure what the position was going to look like as the coordinator and the assistant coordinator. And after a few years, 2 or 3 years, I guess, we said this responsibility needs to go back to the membership. And no better decision did we make than to allow that to happen. And so much has evolved in the last 10 years, Mark. However, you know as well as I do, there was a very solid foundation on which the certification program was built. So it provided us the platform and structure that enabled us to perpetuate any kind of innovation that we wanted to do. It was structured. We built on that structure. We initiated more core courses that added to the credibility and accountability of the program. We had the addition of 2 new certifications, the RMSAA, which was for middle school, and the CIAA, which is for our foreign affiliates. We added the addition of electronic testing and phasing out those hard copy exams. We added online testing, which gave the accessibility of the test anywhere, anytime. It didn't become an issue when you needed to take the test or where you needed to take it. We initiated test data collection and evaluation to ensure the test reliability. We became a very viable tool of the accreditation piece. We keep good data. We're looking at better data to give them to maintain that. The opportunity to contribute to the NIAAA on my part, to contribute to the NIAAA guide to administration was a very important part for me. And I was able to do that through my job there. And then the opportunity to teach across the globe as the certification coordinator. You know, I've been to South America, the Czech Republic, and Thailand, and I'm going to tell you what, no better experience have I had in teaching and learning from those foreign affiliates, and then coming back, working very hard at saying we need to address under our umbrella how we can best serve this group.
Let me follow up with a question about the international. I know you've been to quite a few foreign countries and taught. Talk about how that's different. Well, let me say this. Talk about how it's different. I can't imagine you've got some jet lag when you get to Czechoslovakia or when you get to Thailand. It's not maybe the hour or 2 jet lag. If I'm in Utah and I go to the East Coast to Orlando or National Harbor to teach, I mean, it's a couple hours, but it's 8 or 9 or 10 hours. And I assume you're there probably by yourself as the instructor, because there's probably no team teaching, because we're not going to send a team to teach that. So
well,
talk about that little difference.
You're right, but I did go as a team. And a couple of incidences. Ron Belenko and I taught first in the Czech Republic. So he was there and he joined me. You know, what we ended up finding out was we really needed to get to a location at least a day and a half before our class, because you're exactly right. Jet lag will get you. And remember, in the beginning, we were shipping our manuals with our luggage. So in some cases, especially with our CISA group, our European group, we had many 70 and 80 manuals that went with our luggage, and we had to make sure they got to the site. So we've come a long way, baby, in that regard. but that was a very difficult thing to do. But the thing that I tell everybody about this is those foreign affiliate ADs address the very same issues that stateside ADs do with regard to students and equality and parents and infrastructure and dealing with administration. They deal with the same thing. Here's their issue. Their issues are travel, hosting, where they're going to bed down their kids at night, how long it's going to take them, get them an airline ticket, looking for visa issues. That is huge for them. And I tell people all the time, it's a brave new world with regard to travel with them. So that is where our beginning level 901 courses have come from, because they have a uniqueness about what they do. It's very critical for them to do a good job.
That's fascinating. Thanks so much for sharing that. Let me talk for a moment about National Harbor as a site for the national conference. And I bring this up because I can remember in 2014, sitting next to you, I think we both got an award that year. I think you got the Award of Merit. I got the Kovaleski. And then I think, if I'm right, we were back in 2019 when you went in the Hall of Fame. And so talk about how crazy busy you are in National Harbor during both those times, but then to be honored, I think is such a great thing. Talk about that for a moment.
I'm just so humbled by that. When it came about and I was chosen, I just can't, it's still beyond me that I share that platform with so many outstanding people. And, I guess you just never think about what you've done and how it affects you when something like that comes up. You just don't have any idea how that affects you emotionally. And it did for me. I'm just so proud of it.
Yeah, that's quite a thing. Talk for, let me see, we covered that already. Let's go back to the recent national conference in Denver and give me your impressions there. And I think it was there was just such a different feeling, obviously, because all of us hadn't seen each other for 2 years, but it seemed like it just added so much more to make it special because everyone was just so excited to see everybody in person. So share your observations about the Denver conference.
Well, every year I'm extremely proud of the affirmation and the importance of what athletic directors do. And I see that at those national conferences, but I saw it just booming in Denver because we had not seen each other in a while. Don't you love walking away and with the actionable information that you get from these conferences? I mean, some things you take back and you can initiate immediately at your school that helps us, and that's provided through members who give us work sessions and workshops and networking and keynote speakers, just to name a few. But all the while, and you're part of this, is everybody's just having fun, with everything that we do, we just have fun. The cornhole contest and all those things we do in the exhibit center, building those relationships with people, with new people and our longtime associates. The focus needs to be concentrated on the fresh things that are happening in the athletic world these days. We've got to keep it fresh. We do keep it fresh. Our focus is to keep it fresh, and hopefully people see that. Don't you love, you got to say this as an AD, don't you love it when people's eyes say, this is my aha moment? I love it. I love to watch it. It's just fun.
Absolutely. Let's, I had a thought and it just escaped my mind. So let me go. Hopefully it'll come back to me. I want to know the favorite part of your job now as the director of certification for the NIAAA. And I want to know the favorite part of your job when you were in the district. And I want to know the favorite part of your job when you were in the school. So 3 different answers.
Oh, goodness. Well, this is kind of a cliche, but it's all about relationships. You know that. It is. It's not so much the work that we love and that we do at any one of those levels. It's the camaraderie and how we come together as a group of people to get things done. And surprisingly, and I think we've learned this, that I've learned it in all three of those situations, those tough situations that we've had to deal with is what bring us really close together. And that's where that camaraderie is built. My favorite part has always been watching kids play. It's undoubtedly my favorite part is watching them play, watching them be excited. The relationships that coaches build with them, the long-time relationships that they've had. I went back recently to one of our volleyball teams that won a state championship. I went back to their 10th reunion back at their high school. And it was just like I'd seen them yesterday. It was phenomenal. And I just love those moments.
I want you to talk for a moment about the NIAAA family. When I say the NIAAA family, it's a result of taking that blind step in some cases and becoming involved, because I want to get a message out there to the newer athletic administrators here in Utah and across the nation, because they hear it. And I've talked about it to some of the people in Utah, and they give you this look like that's not, that can't really be what you're describing me, and the relationships that you have and that camaraderie it can't be. And I said, oh, but it is. And so I want you to, because until you dive in with both feet and start to serve in your state and across the nation, I don't think you quite understand it. So talk for a moment about the NIAAA family.
Yeah, I learned this very quickly. If you can walk away from a situation and know immediately that you can pick up the phone and call somebody and talk through an issue, talk through a programming question, you've already built a family. You've become, the relationship is built so fast and so quick. But here's the thing to me, building trust is a hard thing to do. It's hard, and it usually takes a long time. You walk away from a national conference having built a trusting relationship with people that you never would have had an opportunity to come in contact with. You become immediately connected, and you know that they can call you anytime, and you can call them anytime, and there's no judgment. There's no judgment. The judgment is through talking through a situation. That is a family.
That's so well said. Thank you so much for sharing. Let's wrap it up with a couple of questions. The first of which is your advice for that brand new athletic administrator out there. You want to give them two things that you absolutely must do in order to be successful. What would those two things be?
Wow, two things.
And you can have three if you want.
Okay, I think I might do three.
Okay.
I'm going to keep it short. So here you go. Leadership comes at a very steep price. Sometimes to the extent where you have to make some personal sacrifices for the good of others. It's imminent. It's going to happen. Simply acting the part is not enough. You have to get out there and you have to do it. Remember who you serve, and they will serve you back. And my last one is find some balance. When the system is in balance, the program is in balance, everything is in balance, you gain courage, inspiration, and foresight. And you feel like you can step out there because you've built enough of an, I'll use another, of an emotional bank account, or you can drop positives and positives and positives all the time. Admit, if you have to admit you made a mistake, you need to admit it. Because once you built a trust base, people don't care about that. They don't care about the one mistake. Admit the mistake, go back and start over.
Thank you. Sheri, what question should I have asked you that I failed to ask?
People have asked me before, says, what keeps you up at night? Well, I think everybody's asked that question and they need to focus on it. But I think one question might be, what is a trait that you've seen derail many careers? Like people
It's
really,
okay.
really
So
think
share
about it.
share that answer with us.
I think it's failure to admit mistakes. People need to be able to be strong enough and courageous enough to do that. And the last one is what decision do you wish you'd never had to make? And for me, and the most disconcerting and the most emotional is having to release a coach for one reason or another. That's very difficult to do, and we need to know how to do it. We need to know how to do it with empathy, and we need to know how to do it right. So those will probably would do.
All right. Thanks so much. That wraps it up for another edition of the UIAAA Connection. Once again, our guest today has been Sheri Stice, Certified Master Athletic Administrator and Director of Certification for the NIAAA. Thanks, Sheri, for being on the program.
Thank you, Mark. I really enjoyed being with you.
For our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.